Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ancient Mindset. I'm James Dolman. Together with me is Philip on Water. How are you doing, Philip?
I'm wonderful. Okay, tell me the thing already. What's this thing that you found?
Okay.
I'm
We're
ready.
going to we're going to look at the text called from the Book of Newt in the context of scriptures. Can you share the screen?
Yes, okay, I'm sharing the screen.
Yes. Okay, so this is the ancient Egyptian text from the Book of Newt. These texts are usually inscriptions in the on the ceilings of the tombs of Pharaoh or in the temples. So it's Newt, not nut, because the other spelling is N-U-I-T, different transcriptions. So we won't go through everything, but we're going to look at some interesting details and find connections with the Book of Enoch
So the
on my
Book of
end.
Newt is Egyptian. It's an
It's
Egyptian text.
it's an Egyptian text, yes. It's
And
an
what's its date?
all right. It's a second millennium BC. Uh,
Are these the dates here? Is it
yeah,
giving you the
this
date here?
yeah. These are the dates of the text we have, inscriptions we have.
So originally, perhaps the Middle Kingdom composition, it says it appears on the
Yes.
ceilings of the cenotaph of Seti the First, 19th
Mm-hmm.
Dynasty 19. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and Abydos at the tomb of Ramses the Fourth, Dynasty 20. Okay,
The beginning of the text, now the text is kind of hard to read. It's not very easy to read, but I'm not going to explain everything, but I'm going to take out the point. So the uniform darkness, ocean of the gods, the place from which birds come, that is describing the sky. This is from her northwestern side up to her northeastern side, open to the duat, that is on her northern side. Now, this is a very difficult sentence. Duat is what is understood as the land of the dead. Usually, people understand the land of the dead as underground, but actually, you see that the duet is on her northern side. So who is her? Her is Nut, the Egyptian goddess Nut. That's the goddess of sky. The small paragraph shows that in Egyptian cosmology, it's like the sky is a dome, but this dome is actually has an entrance or a broken place kind of on the north. So on the north, it's directly linked to the land of the death. But it's not just on the north of the sky of the dome, the sky. It's also the second paragraph. The upper side of this sky exists in uniform darkness, the southern, northern, western, and eastern limits of which are unknown. These having been fixed in the waters, the waters above the heaven, as we see in the Genesis. The author actually pointed out here in Genesis 1:7. In internals, there is no light of Ram there. Ram is the manifestation of the sun. He does not appear there, a place whose south, north, west, and east land is unknown by the gods of or Ax. Ax is the dead people, the spirit of the dead. There being no brightness there, and as for every place void of sky and void of land or void of earth, that is the entire duet. So the entire duet is also on the upper side of the sky. In other words, the land of the dead is not underworld, it's in the upper world, something like that, which is very different from the normal depiction. Her right arm is on the north side, the left on the northern eastern side. So basically, it lays out how the goddess is kind of on the earth. Her head is the western arcade. Arcade is the point where the sun appears or disappears. And her mouth is the west, and then her crotch is the eastern arcade. On the hieroglyphics, you can actually see that on the cheek of the goddess, it writes that it's labeled Western arcade. At the crotch, it's labeled Eastern arcade. So these are the appearing point and the disappearing point of the sun. So as I read through these, it gives me some very weird feeling. The feeling I had was that there seems to be some inconsistency. Now, first of all, how is it that duet is on to her north, to the northern side of the of the goddess, and at the same time it's also like above it, it's also above the newt, so it's kind of weird to me. And the sun sets and the sun rises, like it seems like inside the body of, after sun sets, when the sun is not seen, it seems that the sun is actually inside the body of the goddess. But actually, in the next section, the cycle of the sun, it tells us that the sun actually travels into the land of the dead, and went through his father Osiris. So it's kind of weird. But then think about the mouth and the crotch as some kind of portal. Then it makes a little bit sense. I drew a picture out of what I've just read. So this is the earth. So this is the dome of the heaven, and then the sun appears in the east, and then travel. Okay, this is the sun. And then it travels to the west. And it seems to me that it's telling me that it's not traveling underground. That's not the right route, because the duet, the land of the dead, is actually above the sky. So actually, it should travel like this. This is the route of the sun. And also it goes to the north. So probably goes also to the north, because the duet is on the northern side of the goddess. So bear this picture in mind, and then that reminds me a passage that I've read in First Enoch. This is the Book of Enoch, the first Enoch, section 3. It's the calendar section, chapter 72. I'm going to read from verse 2 to verse 5, and I will point out some interesting details. And this is the first law of the new luminaries. The luminary, the sun, has its rising in the eastern portals of the heaven and is sitting in the western portals of the heaven. Remember, we just talked about portals. And I saw 6 portals in which the sun rises, and 6 portals in which the sun sets, and the moon rises and sits in these portals. And the leaders of the stars and those whom they lead, 6 in the east and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. Also many windows to the right and the left of these portals. And first there goes forth the great luminary named the sun, and his circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and he is quite filled with illuminating and heating fire. The chariot on which he ascends, the wind drives, and the sun goes down from heaven and returns through the north. Remember, where is the duet, the land of the dead in the Egyptian text? It's actually on the north of the sky, of the dome of the sky. So it goes down from heaven and returns through the north in order to reach the east. And is so guided that he comes to the appropriate portal and shines in the face of the earth, and so forth. You see, the sun sits in the western portals of heaven. That is to say, actually, the sun goes out of the dome of the heaven and travel to the north, and then come back through the eastern portal and go back to the earth again. That's very similar to what we've just read in the Egyptian text. And there's more than that. If we go back to the Egyptian text, the last paragraph, when the incarnation of this God, that this is talking about the sun, when the incarnation of this God comes forth from the duet, the sun coming out of the duet, these stars come forth after him at the birthplace. The birthplace is where the sun appears. So the stars are following the sun coming out of the portal. And here it also says that the incarnation of God enters her mouth. That the sun enters the into the duet, and the stars, the sailing stars may enter after him and come forth after him. So that's also what we've just read in Enoch. The moon and the stars and the leaders of the stars, actually, they all follow the sun. They all follow the course of the sun. So I find it very interesting because I actually see the pattern of the cosmology in this Egyptian text that is actually almost identical to the text in Enoch, but it's not exactly identical because the Enoch doesn't say that sun travels to the land of the dead. The Egyptian text is kind of confused on this. The Egyptian text brought the realm that is outside the dome, confused it with the land of the dead. You and I both believe that Enoch wrote Enoch and every portion of it. And reading this text, you can see that the cosmology depicted here is pretty ancient, and I think we have if you believe that Enoch wrote Enoch, I think we have a good remnant of the Enochite cosmology in the ancient Egyptian text. What do you think?
Well, you know that the Egyptians had the Book of Enoch, right?
Did they?
Yeah,
When?
the Dead Sea Scrolls say that. And the writer, the ancient historian Eupolemus says that. So in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have the Genesis Apocryphon, right? Which is
Yeah.
actually the book of Lamech, the book of which has the small book of Enoch in it, and the book of Noah and the book of Abraham, the real books written by those actual pre-flood people and Abraham, who's post-flood. This isn't the Book of Mormon, by the way. This is something different. The Book of Mormon is that's a hoax, but the Dead Sea Scroll Book of Abraham is the actual Book of Abraham. And anyways, in Abraham's book that he wrote with his own hands, in that copy from the Dead Sea Scrolls, he says that he went down to Egypt and he shared the Book of Enoch with the Egyptians. And so we have that in the Bible. You know, the Dead Sea
Yes,
Scrolls are our Bible. So in our Bible, it says that Abraham brought Enoch for he brought Enoch
that's
to
right.
the Egyptians. So in Jubilees traces, actually it may say that in Jubilees too. I don't remember. Jubilees may say this too, but so Jubilees traces how the Book of Enoch was passed down. So it's not just like, you know, we don't know how it was passed down. We actually have historically documented evidence of how it was passed down in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in like these books by the original ancestors of everybody, like from Lamech and Noah, and we also have in the Jubilees how it was passed down, and we know that the Book of Enoch was passed down to his son Methuselah, and then those books were passed down. Ultimately, they came down to Noah somehow, and then
Mm,
from Noah it was Shem who was passing them down in Shem's line, and they ended up in the hands of Abraham. But the original language that Noah and Enoch spoke was lost during the Tower of Babel incident, and an angel revealed to Abraham for 3 months the original language and restored the ancient language of those scrolls to Abraham, and that's how he was able to figure it out. And so, and then again in the Genesis Apocryphon, in Abraham's own book itself, he says that he shared first Enoch with the Egyptians. And what you're looking at, this is the Dead Sea Scrolls Study Edition by Tickchiller, Ibert Tickchiller. And the Dead Sea Scrolls Study Edition gives you the transcription of the Hebrew and Aramaic text on the left and the English translation on the right. So it's a very good study tool, and it gives you all the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of them, except for the ones that occur in the Standard Bible. Those are in a separate volume, but all the apocryphal text it gives you in this volume. And here's what it says in the Genesis Apocryphon. This is column 19 of the Genesis Apocryphon. It says, and this is in the Book of Abraham section of the Genesis Apocryphon. It says, Abraham is giving his story. After these 5 years, and then there's some missing text. 3 men of the princes of Egypt came, some missing text, from Pharaoh Zoan on account of my words and of my wife. They gave me many presents, expecting from me goodness, wisdom, and truth. I read in front of them the book of the words of Enoch. And then there's some words missing concerning the famine, and then there's some words missing. And anyway, so we see that Abraham says in his own words that he read from them the book of the words of Enoch. Uh, so that is, yeah. So La Chatav, the book or the writing, Mali of the words Chanok. This is in Aramaic. Genesis Apocryphon and maybe Jubilees are not the only texts that say Abraham brought Enoch to the Egyptians. As I said, there's an ancient historian called Eupolemus, and Eupolemus is actually quoting an even older historian who we only have quotes from. I think his name is Artapanus, and or Hecatatus. I can't remember. But if you look up Eupolemus is in Charlesworth's Old Testament pseudepigrapha volume. So those two big volumes of the Old Testament pseudepigrapha, the Eupolemus text is in there, and Eupolemus has so many connections with the Book of Giants, Jubilees, Enoch, and the Genesis Apocryphon. It's really incredible. It's almost as if Eupolemus somehow was acquainted with those texts from Qumran. We just don't know. But in any case, he tells us that the Egyptians get their some of their stuff from Abraham, sure. And these books tell us that Abraham brought Enoch to the Egyptians, and so that's how the Egyptians had their knowledge. That's how they got it from Enoch. They got it from us, you could say, because, you know, our faith. Our faith. So this doesn't surprise me that because the Egyptians are basically taking from Enoch, and the Chaldeans too. You know, the Chaldeans too would have ultimately gotten this knowledge from Enoch. And you know, there's connections between like ancient Chaldean and ancient Egyptian stuff, and that's probably because Abraham came from Chaldea, or the Chaldeans, and then he went to Egypt and he brought with him the words of Enoch, who's the ancestor of all of us. And apparently apparently the Chaldeans and the Egyptians, especially the Egyptians, seem to have borrowed from this. But of course, as the and also, since, you know, we're all from Noah, and Noah had this knowledge in these books himself, we're all from Noah. They would have had, you know, they would have had it preserved orally in some ways as well, and that's also how they would have had this knowledge passed down. But they've kind of taken it and they've made it into their own. Like they've added details or added imageries of, like, you know, this type of thing.
Mythologies into it. Yeah.
But because Shem had these preserved in book form, and because Shem was the chosen line, we can expect that, of course, you know, he actually had the knowledge preserved better. And so we can trust these books because they come ultimately through Shem and from Noah and Enoch. But the other traditions of the people who came ultimately from Ham and from Japheth, and who didn't have these books preserved, they would have sort of twisted or distorted the truth in some ways. And that's what we see. If you study the ancient mythologies, that's basically what it looks like. It looks like, if you start from Enoch as the base, it looks like these ancient mythologies they had something like that, this core sort of ideas that you find in Enoch and that you find in like the flood story and stuff, but they take it in their own direction. That's what it looks. And to me, what that shows is that just proves that those are all independent witnesses to the same truth. But you have to have a baseline. What is the objective thing that you can judge everything else from? And God has given that to us in the scriptures. But there's a zodiac in an ancient Egyptian temple. It's called Dendera, the Dendera zodiac, and it matches the description of how Enoch describes the cosmology. Pretty close. The only difference is, again, the Egyptians will depict they'll depict the portals, or they'll depict like different characters, or based on like animals or like animal human hybrids. And so that's really basically the Egyptians are just like stylizing the same truth in their own sort of way. And so, you know, by the way, the fact that the Egyptians even have this cycle of the sun text shows that they were thinking about this idea, and I think that shows that it has a source in something earlier, which would be Enoch, right? Because, you know, it's like, why do you have? Is it a coincidence that you have the Egyptians and Enoch both have this cycle of the sun and these calendar sort of texts? Or is it likely that they are both drawing off a common source, or that one is drawing off the other? And it seems like there's a connection. Like it doesn't seem like there's especially when you have the sort of the parallels, the strong parallels that you pointed out, which are there. So anyways, I say all that to say this: there's a lot of evidence if you believe the Dead Sea Scrolls, and if you believe in some of these apocryphal texts, and even in the secular historians like Eupolemus, whom scholars say are pseudepigraphal, of course. You know, the scholars say all kinds of stuff is pseudepigraphal when it's not. Anyways,
they even say Paul is pseudepigraphal.
even some of Paul's letters are super beautiful. If you see all of these different documents, you'll see that they all have connections and that they all point to the sort of the same thing. And
Mm,
this tradition, this idea that Abraham had the Book of Enoch and he shared it with the Egyptians, it is a very obscure tradition. It is sort
mm,
of hidden, you could say, and you would only find it if you're really searching like through these
mm.
documents and such. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
there and it's very strong if you do see it in these texts. It is
yeah,
there. And so that's the thing. It's like you have to go searching for these things.
yeah.
You have to put in the effort to find and search out these truths. And if you do,
Right,
though,
right.
it can be found. I think this is a very uh on a very deep level. I think this is a very significant thing. I think it's a very
Yeah,
important thing. It's
yeah.
it's not just knowing that Abraham shared this with the Egyptians, the implications of that, I think, are huge. Like it completely changes how we see history. It changes how we see the Bible. It changes how we see. It changes our appreciation. It adds to our
Mm,
appreciation for like the Book of Enoch and some of these things. Um,
right,
so I think that
right.
when you think about the implications of it, it's very huge, and it changes our perspective on a lot of things.
And I think the parallel we've just found, we've just read in these two texts actually shows it's, I think it's a very clear attestation to that tradition. It just goes to show that it's authentic, it's real. Like whatever is written in Dead Sea Scrolls, whatever is written in those apocryphal books, they're real, they're there. Like it's not something that people just make up, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think that well, this is my opinion, but I think the bigger parallel is the fact that the Egyptians even have this text at all, like the
Mm,
cycle of the sun, and that they've worded it the way they've worded it. Like if you look at the general sort of wording of it, it is
yeah.
kind of similar to how Enoch sort of describes things, isn't it? In
Yeah,
some
yeah, it
ways,
is, it is. Yeah,
like
very much,
they
yeah.
talk about like directions, they talk about portals, they talk
Yeah,
about the cycle of the sun. Like it's very sort of similar to the language of Enoch in that calendar section
yeah, yeah, yeah.
from chapters like 72 to like 80 something in Enoch.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so you can see like I think we should look for the parallels in the bigger picture and in the
Mm,
details. And if you look at the
mhm,
bigger picture too, it seems very clear to me that the Egyptians are drawing off of something that is very similar to the Book of Enoch that we have.
mm,
Now, of course,
yeah.
that's me trying to be reasonable and being reasonably skeptical as well. But from a faith-based perspective, it's obvious to me that this Egyptian text is in
Yeah.
some way based on the Book of Enoch, like in some way. Like apparently, as we just said, the Egyptians
Mm,
had Enoch. Abraham read it to them. He
mm,
shared it with them, and so they
yeah.
had this knowledge. And it's like we have little hints of this in the scriptures. And of course, I'm considering the Book of Abraham and the Dead Sea Scrolls as a book of scripture here when I say that. It's like we have little hints of these things in the scriptures, and when you go search out these things in like the real world, you find more of it. It's like we have glimpses in the scriptures, and then in the real world, like you actually see where
Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
those glimpses, you see them more fully, you see how it has actually impacted the ancient world.
Yes.
It
Yes.
really one thing that really stinks is it's like we've forgotten about all this stuff. It's like
Hmm.
nobody reads this stuff, like who cares, right? Like
Mm.
who is actually reading and studying this stuff and finding these parallels and adding to the evidence for the apocryphal text? Like who's reading this stuff? Like nobody's
That's right.
reading
Nobody
these big
cares. Yeah.
thick the books. You should show it in the video so people can see these
Yeah.
in the context of scripture. It's yeah, so
Yeah.
it's
This
this
is,
thick book, right? And there's four of them. There's four
yes.
volumes, and it's just a compilation of a bunch of ancient Near Eastern texts. It's also kind of expensive, so that's part of the reason
Yeah,
why
right.
people aren't reading it more. But
Well,
like who's yeah.
you can get all four volumes for $100 if you go to SBL and the ETS.
Yeah, okay. So, well, it's kind of expensive to go there too, I guess, for most people.
Right,
But
right.
anyway, this is kind of
Yeah.
like groundbreaking stuff. Like, this is something we should all be doing. Like, we should all be studying these ancient Near Eastern texts and seeing how they relate to the Apocrypha, not just the Bible, but also the
Yeah.
Apocrypha. When I say the Bible, I mean like the Standard Bible, not just the Standard Bible, but also these extra books. And so
Mm.
what we're doing here is kind of groundbreaking, isn't it, Jimmy? So
Yeah.
this is really
Yeah. Yeah.
great.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
is.
this is a great thing.
And
I
yeah.
expect we'll find a lot of more connections.
Yes, yes. This is an amazing, and I'm very glad before reading the ancient Near Eastern text, as I read all those texts, I feel read all those apocryphal texts, I feel like these are just concepts. Like there may be some pictures, here and there, it's not very clear, but you actually find parallels in the text, actual attestation, like in how those knowledges played out in ancient history, in their inscriptions, in their texts. Well, this is amazing to me. Like I feel like that's exactly that just goes to show like Asian people has
Yeah.
the truth and we've lost all of them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But this is a very amazing discussion. We're going to discover more as I read through the ancient Near Eastern texts and other texts as well. I'm happy that Philip can join me, and thank you all for joining us. See you next time.